told about that meeting. And Bannon goes on to characterize the Trump Tower meeting as both treasonous and unpatriotic. He predicted that Mueller's team will, quote, crack Don Jr. like an egg. Ouch. The president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was also called out by Bannon, and he said, you realize where this is going. This is all about money laundering. Mueller chose senior prosecutor Andrew Weissman first, and he's a money laundering guy. Their path to blanking Trump goes right through Paul Manafort, Don Jr., and Jared Kushner. It's as plain as the hair on your face. The president responded in a typically blunt statement. He said, Steve Bannon has nothing to do with me or my presidency. When he was fired, he not only lost his job, he lost his mind. Steve doesn't represent my base. He's only in it for himself. Okay. Here's my advice in the form of a few questions. I'm kind of playing a little bit of, Dr. Phil, maybe a little Judge Judy here. Some questions. Who does this help? Does this kind of unseemly tit-for-tat advance the conservative populist agenda at all? What's going through, frankly, both sides' minds? Now, Donald Trump is the head of the Republican Party. It's not Bannon, it's not me, it's Donald Trump. And with these statements, Bannon has given basically credence to the worst conspiracy theories of the impeached Trump forces. Bannon's probably won himself a trip to testify on Capitol Hill as well. And is that really what Bannon wants? I mean, I know Steve Bannon. Is that what he wants? If there is a policy difference between Bannon and Trump on any issue, or any of us with the administration on any issue, have a substantive exchange. Rally the voters to your point of view on whatever issue it happens to be. But fellas, it doesn't really make sense for a high-profile advisor and his former boss to publicly attack each other when the stakes are this high. How does that make any sense? And aren't you kind of playing right into the hands of the Democrats and the media, who are hoping for nothing more than your mutually assured destruction? Ironically, what Bannon's comments, again, if accurate, have actually done, they've kind of created a tidal wave of establishment support for President Trump. They're all rallying to his side today. Not exactly how we saw this story developing. Now on to more important matters. There was a big meeting with congressional leaders of both parties at the White House today on a potential deal to give legal status to the 800,000 so-called dreamers brought into the country by their parents or sent to the country on their own. And it's a negotiation that's scheduled to continue tomorrow. The president's going to be really involved tomorrow in that meeting, I understand. And as you'll recall, Obama, through an executive action, it's called Deferred Action on Childhood Arrivals, DACA, he allowed all these people to stay and ultimately work in the country for rolling 2-year periods. You can re-up after every 2-year period. In fact, in 2017, even during the Trump administration, tens of thousands of illegal dreamers applied for and did receive their DACA status. So, in a way, Obama's policy lived on. But last September, Trump said he would end the program. But then, in what was kind of a game of hot potato, illegal alien style, he gave Congress 6 months to find their own solution. Kind of smart, actually. But Trump demanded that lawmakers pass responsible immigration reform. I guess, as part of all this. So what might responsible immigration reform look like? Well, the president has given us a few clues already.
This kid came in through a lottery system. I've already instructed Congress they must end it.
You talked about E-Verify, building the wall, chain migration, which is a huge problem.
All of those things are happening.
They're going to have to do E-Verify chain migration?
Sure.
Is that a requirement for you?
Chain migration is a disaster for this country, and it's going to end.
Will it be part of a Dreamer deal,
yes,
a DACA deal?
It'll be part of a DACA deal.
Well, the president's on the right track here. And as I said last night, there must be non-negotiables for any DACA deal. I'm frankly concerned about any DACA deal. But if it's going to happen, we must fully fund the border wall. We must end chain migration. We must defund these sanctuary cities. We must end the visa lottery. We must mandate E-Verify, hire thousands more immigration and ICE agents to enforce the law, and immigration judges, by the way, and cut the number of green card recipients by half. The dreamer nightmare, by the way, it's already upon us. I love how they use the word dreamers, like none of the rest of us have dreams. Dreamers actually will cost the American taxpayer $2.6 billion annually if Congress passes amnesty. That's according to the Congressional Budget Office, not me. And more unaccompanied alien children are coming across now, today. Why are they doing that? Why are the numbers going up of the unaccompanied minors? Because Congress is flirting with granting citizenship to dreamers and all the benefits of health care, education, housing. So foreigners see the green light here. According to the last 2 months of available stats, we've seen a surge. This is how bad it is. 7,000 unaccompanied children have crossed the border. And by the way, they cannot be deported to their home country under current U.S. law. They get to stay here. They're sent out to they're detained initially, then they're released into the U.S., becoming our responsibility, the U.S. taxpayers' responsibility. Given that we have, just think about it, this is just one metric, thousands of homeless U.S. veterans on the streets tonight, shivering in the cold, with no one to care for them, suffering from PTSD, mental illness, addiction problems. By the way, about 200 yards from where I'm broadcasting right now, we have them in the streets at a homeless shelter when they can't get in. They're out in the streets, but we're catering to the illegal immigrants. That's the priority of Congress? This is unconscionable. In a moment, we're going to explain the demographic, political, and cultural effects of illegal immigration that have swept, and by the way, could swamp the country. The failure of Republicans to protect and secure the border cost them dearly at the ballot box for several cycles. And their perpetual efforts to cater to the violators of our laws at the expense of working citizens and legal immigrants are one of the reasons that Donald Trump got elected in the first place. Remember, it's called America First. And if Republicans make some quickie deal on DACA, some cutesy thing they pull, and violate the president's promise to his base, it'll be GOP last. And that's the angle. By the way, an important note, we contacted 10 senators who are intimately involved in the DACA negotiations today. It's a lot of calls, and a lot more we made as well. But the key people, they're 10 people. Not one of them was willing to come on this show to discuss this critical national issue or what they have planned, what's going on behind closed doors. I'm telling you, my instinct kicks in right here. My little spidey radar goes off. This, to me, could spell trouble. I didn't like, the capital with a capital T. It's like Music Man. Now on to our guests. Here in the studio with me in Washington, I got a trifecta. Steve Camarata is the Director of Research for the Center for Immigration Studies. Harmeet Dhillon is an attorney and a Republican strategist. And Jose Aristimuño is a former spokesperson for the DNC. All right, let's start with you, Camarata. On the statistics here, I think people who just watched that angle were shocked to find out that right now we have a surge of unaccompanied minors crossing our southern border.
Right. I mean, it's very clear that all the talk of an amnesty tends to cause more young people to come because they know, as you pointed out, that we don't deport people unless they're from Mexico. Then we can send them back. But from all other countries, we essentially release them into the United States, and they just then blend into the illegal population.
But the minors never can be deported, correct? They can't be deported if they're here and they come here and they're unaccompanied. I mean, I have not seen an example of a minor.
We generally don't send them home, but they could be, like, let's say they applied for asylum, they didn't get it. We can try to identify their country and send them back, but it's very difficult.
It's rare.
Once you make it to the border, and remember, these are not people slipping in at the border. Apprehensions is a little bit misleading. It's people turning themselves in because they know that we'll just release them into the United States. In many cases, we pay their bus fare or airfare to ship them to their illegal alien relatives in the United States.
Demographic changes to the country, electoral changes, because I know you specialize in analyzing this data.
So legal immigration has the much bigger impact because it's much bigger. Over the next 20 years, it looks like legal immigration will add potentially 15 million voters to the United States. That's people who will reach the age of 18 and be able to naturalize.
How do Republicans win in that?
It's very hard. All the research shows immigrants are voting and their children are voting about 2 to 1 for the Democratic Party, and mainly because they agree with them on policy, whether it's Obamacare,
big government,
more
big
income
benefits.
redistribution. And so, quite naturally, the political system will reflect the values of the changing electorate. So it's hard to see if legal immigration continues, how a conservative Republican Party survives.
Jose, the president is going to sit down tomorrow. He's going to be intimately involved in these meetings. He said, including in an interview with me, that the wall and chain migration must be part of any deal. And chain migration is really responsible, Steve's done these studies, for exploding immigration into the United States. It's not just your parents or your minor children. You're bringing in uncles, aunts, adult children, their parents oftentimes. So one person can bring in 7, 8, 9, 10. That's how our immigration has exploded. It's not merit-based. If he has those lists of demands that includes especially chain migration, visa lottery, a lot of people are against that, and some of these other matters, what do the Democrats do?
Look, we got to remember that the president changes his mind every single second, pretty much. It's hard to keep up with him, right? Just go on Twitter and you'll see it for yourself. I don't believe a word that the president's saying on all the little lists that he has saying that all those non-negotiable things. I don't believe that. I mean, the notion that Donald Trump is even a Republican, right? I have my doubts about that.
Okay, so try to stick to, I get that you don't like Trump, but let's try to just really drill down on this particular issue. If he says, we'll do DACA amnesty for an end to chain migration and the full funding of the wall, for instance, would you support that?
Absolutely not. If he wants to keep his job, he needs to extend DACA. We're not going to, look, there's already a wall in Mexico. I invite all of you guys, let's go down to the border. There's a wall in Mexico already, with Mexico already. We don't need another wall.
Where's that?
I'm all for more security.
Hold on. What are you talking
There's
about?
A wall already with Mexico.
There's a wall with Mexico?
Of course there's a wall.
I've been at the border, and people just walk across the border, or they swim across. What is it, 12 miles from Imperial Beach, San Diego, Operation Gatekeeper. That was back in 1996. I reported that when I used to work for another network.
Most of the border does not.
Yeah, I mean,
but there's walls there already. Well, my point is that there's already border structure there. We don't need that type of security.
I'm just trying to get information here.
Sure.
This is good information. So you are saying tonight that you would not give legal status, a pathway to citizenship, for these poor, struggling, illegal immigrant kids, aren't they, up to 37 years old?
They're
but
mostly
that's fine.
all adults, right?
Some of them are most of them are all adults. So you would deny them legal status because you're so desperate to get the uncles, aunts, cousins, third removed into the country? Are you kidding me?
Let me say this.
That's amazing to me.
No, look, this is the way that we have to frame the answer. I agree with the majority of Americans who say, let's pass a clean DREAM Act that includes a path to
Okay, well, your party isn't in control. The Republican Party is in control, so that's kind of reality.
And you guys
that's
could have.
Reality.
I know. Look, well, guess what? You guys could have been the party, or no, you guys, but the GOP could have been the party that said, you know what? Let's protect the.
We had that. We had that person. We actually had two of those people, Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio, and they couldn't win their home state. Harmeet, I got to get to you. This is a big issue. We want to be welcoming to immigrants. Your family are legal immigrants in the United States, originally from India. Your family has done incredibly well. My family ultimately was from Poland. You know, they struggled, but they were proud immigrants. Where are we on this issue here?
Well, I think one of the problems is because successive generations of both Republicans and Democrats have refused to enforce our immigration laws, we now have a situation where with terrorism after 9/11, a lot of Americans are conflating legal and illegal immigration. I think that's a problem. So all the things the president is talking about, the chain migration, the E-Verify, the end to some of these loopholes is important, but we also have to look at some of the irrationality in our existing immigration system for legal immigrants. So, for example, you mentioned cutting H-1B, cutting the green cards in half. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that's kind of a blunt instrument to a complicated problem.
People a year. That's a lot of people.
Well, but there's a lot of people who are legal.
A lot of American engineers who can't get jobs.
Well, those people are the ones who are waiting. So you should understand that the H-1B workers who are here legally and following our rules, they're the ones in 10-year queues if they're coming from India or one of these other countries like that who are waiting legally, while the president is talking about giving instant legal status to these DACA people. And if you're an H-1B worker in Silicon Valley, your kid who's 18, when they turn 18, has to go home to India.
But how is that America first? How is catering to Silicon Valley's needs America first? This is what I get it. Like, we should welcome people in to the extent that we need the people to come in. I mean, there is not a universal right to immigrate to the United States. It's not a constitutional right. There's not a universal right. Mexico doesn't allow anyone to move and become citizens. New Zealand doesn't. France doesn't. There actually is a legal process.
Right.
And a legal legal
doesn't
process
either.
must be respected. Steve Camarata, if the president sits down with the Democrats tomorrow, and at the end of all of this, they decide to cut a deal, and it's a down payment on a wall. I've heard that little thing thrown around. $1.6 billion gets you nothing. Down payment on a wall, maybe some chain migration phase out. What does the base do of this?
Yeah, look, the president, to his credit, has been very bold and consistent on this.
I think he has been. Now, Jose, I know you say, I think he actually,
but he has been.
This. We'll see if he stays that way.
And if he
better.
wants his voters to show up in 2018 and then ultimately in 2020, and he wants to do something they don't like DACA, he's got to give them things, not just enforcement, but an end to chain migration.
Jose,
otherwise, it's not clear that he can, the Congress is not going to flip.
Build a wall. Mexico's going to pay for it. I mean, that was a simple phrasing. He didn't say how Mexico was going to pay for it. Maybe it's they don't get.
Because he doesn't know, because that's not going to happen.
Well, but maybe they don't get as many remittances. Maybe there's a remittance tax of 40%.
We could do that.
Jose, this economy is doing really well by any standard, and people are very
because of the last president in large terms, right?
If it's bad, it's George Bush's fault and Trump's, and if it's good, it's Obama's. Okay, but
it's the truth.
The voters typically will judge a president on the economy.
And
but
he's doing a horrible job.
Okay. You know, Jose, this is where I think the left and right will not come together on an issue. If just on basic metrics we can't agree, on every metric, including in Hispanic neighborhoods, in African-American neighborhoods, in small entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, the economy is showing signs of real growth.
And I'm very
not
happy
one
about
point.
that.
But so that's all I'm saying. Look, I'm so glad you're on the show. I'm glad to have your opinion. But I mean, come on, the economy is doing well, and all I'm trying to say is, whatever happens on this, a growing economy is really going to help this country.
Absolutely.
And it's really going to help whites, poor whites, blacks. Rich people will do well, for sure. Middle class will do better. Hispanics, who create jobs at a great clip, who many of them are incredibly patriotic, great people.
Absolutely.
But I think when we say Donald Trump is a liar, he's not going to. He's already done quite a bit just for all people, whether you're Hispanic
one
or black.
legislation he passed in 1 year, under 30% approval rating. That's success.
So you don't want Republicans to be popular with Hispanics, correct? I mean, that's just your nightmare. If it was like a conservative Republican Hispanic who wants to build the law, that's your nightmare, right?
If we want the GOP to do well with Hispanics, then you know what? Pass a clean DREAM Act. If you guys do that, I promise you.
Well, where are all those? If your argument is correct,
evidence of that
if that is argument is correct, why did Neil Kashkari win in California? Why didn't Christy Todd Whitman win? Why aren't all these people winning?
This is like Lucy with the football, Laura. The Republicans keep falling for this. It's nonsense, and that's not how we're going to win. But the president does need to keep his promises.
He has to keep his promises to the American people, and also win Hispanics over with a growing economy, and go speak to them and listen to their concerns.
Yes.
Great to have all of you on. Great panel. By the way, Ann Coulter, guys, and Rich Lowry are going to be here with their take on the Bannon versus Trump feud. Oh, my God, what it means for the conservative populist movement. And later, insights from journalists. You're not going to want to miss this. Kim Strassel, John Solomon will be here now that deadline for the FBI and Justice Department is here to turn over those documents. It just expired. What next? Don't go away. President Trump just unified Republicans in Congress to pass major tax reform, and now they face a possible DACA deal, a huge boost, if they get lucky, in infrastructure spending, and the budget to deal with. But what impact will the scuffle between Steve Bannon and President Trump have on the president's agenda? To discuss, I'm joined by columnist Ann Coulter in New York, one of the earliest and strongest Trump supporters, and also in New York is National Review editor Rich Lowry, who was less than an enthusiastic supporter at the outset of Donald Trump. Both of you, it's great to have you on. Different perspectives on this, perhaps. But let's start with you, Ann, on this Bannon-Trump feud. Some wild legal implications for both Steve and perhaps the president's team, which I find kind of wild that he might have said these things, given the appetite for Mueller and the Democrats, what they want. But on the issue of the agenda, the Trump agenda, do you see any impact here?
No, really none at all. I don't know whether to believe the quotes. I haven't heard anything from Bannon. There's the book review editor of the Washington Post just posted an article saying that there are some credibility issues with Michael Wolff, though. I mean, a lot of it's a fun read. There were a few good points Bannon made. The stuff about Russia was completely insane, so it kind of surprises me that he'd say that.
Treasonous, Anne? Treasonous and unpatriotic to take a meeting?
Yeah, I'd put that in the...
Yeah, and that he definitely
I put that
marched,
in the insane camp.
Yeah,
but the same camp
he marched the lawyer up to Trump's office. Like, I mean, who knows whether, I doubt that some two-bit lawyer from Russia was taken up to the 26th floor. That just seems, to me, that seems ridiculous.
Apparently he wasn't, but he also said, if you want to have a meeting like this, what you do is you send your lawyers to a Marriott in New Hampshire. Well, Hillary did a lot more than that, but you launder it. It was kind of a stupid meeting. Hillary paid $12 million to the Russians to get dirt on Donald Trump. So, no, the Russia stuff has been boring and stupid to begin with. I don't think it's really going to have any effect, although, I mean, it's clear that the media has no idea why Trump won. I'm starting to wonder if Trump and Bannon have any idea why Trump won. The issues that Trump ran on, and I wish you would always have me on when you're talking about Dreamers or immigration, is immigration, trade, and no more wars. The trade deals are easy. The no more wars ought to be easy. Doesn't seem that easy. But it's all about immigration. And I mean, in this last to be fighting about the Alabama election, there was a great member of Congress running in that election. Trump didn't endorse him. Yeah, Bannon was in the White House at the time.
But that's not. And I want Rich to get on this because they're not debating immigration. I agree with Ann on the immigration issue. Trump has no. But I'm saying what I'm saying.
Oh, sorry, they were debating Alabama.
Right. The comments in the Wolff account. Again, we're going to learn more about this, whether it's true, not. I'm sure we'll hear from Bannon at some point. But Rich, on the issue of immigration. Look, it's tons of room to argue with any DACA deal or, gosh, should we build the wall, have 10 years of enforcement before we ever entertain a DACA deal? That's a legitimate debate that, people like Ann and myself and Bannon would probably have with some of the Trump folks. But that's not what this was about. Again, this is one excerpt of a book. We don't know what else is in this book. There could be, and I'm sure there's a lot more. But your take on this aspect of it.
Well, we have other people who are quoted in the book who are contesting the quotes. So we don't know 100% whether he used this nuclear word of treason, but it is consistent with blind quotes we've seen over the last year where Bannon really hates Jared Kushner and thinks he was doing something untoward with Russia. And look, I obviously had my reservations about Donald Trump, but I do want him to succeed. And I think the fact was, in the White House, Bannon alienated a lot of people. He did spend a lot of time leaking. He got fired for leaking when he called out of the blue a left-wing journalist from the American Prospect. And Alabama was a debacle. And when these allegations came out, and a lot of them were credible, Bannon didn't back off in the least. He proudly continued to support Roy Moore and got Donald Trump involved. And for Donald Trump, winning is very important. And the fact you look at the last month, Bannon led him into a debacle in Alabama, whereas Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan, Bannon's nemesis, actually passed a huge part of the Trump agenda. That's the biggest legislative accomplishment so far.
And do you find it interesting or perhaps ironic that the establishment is, or frightening, that the establishment is rallying to Donald Trump after this excerpt is released?
Oh, yeah, of course. It's terrifying. And you see, I anticipated Rich's response to bring up Alabama. No, that mistake was Donald Trump's. That's why I say I wonder if Donald Trump knows why he was elected. Why would he endorse Luther Strange, who was a disaster on immigration, when Mo Brooks was running? At least in Bannon's defense, he was still in the White House and couldn't endorse anyone during the original primary. It was, and if you have to choose between, I mean, neither Roy Moore or Luther Strange were great on immigration. We could have counted on Roy Moore just because he would have voted against Mitch McConnell.
Right, but now we don't have to relitigate Alabama, but how does this war of words help the conservative populist agenda? I would say it doesn't help it at all.
No, it doesn't help it, but I also think it doesn't hurt. I just think it's utterly irrelevant. I mean, Macomb County, Michigan didn't vote twice for Obama, and then Trump so that the hedge fund managers could keep the carried interest loophole. They didn't vote for tax cuts.
Well,
they didn't vote for
great
more
points.
ban.
I mean, they also didn't vote for Steve Bannon. And the fact is, there are a lot of people who are in favor of this immigration agenda still around Donald Trump. Stephen Miller, very effective guy. Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas, very influential with this White House. So the idea that Steve Bannon has at least betrayed in the press that he somehow uniquely understands Trump and was uniquely responsible for the election victory was another thing that was rubbed Trump the wrong way, and another reason this breakup has been brewing for a long time.
All right, guys, thank you so much. And by the way, we told you about the 300 Hollywood women who've come together to stop sexual abuse. And now one of their leaders, Meryl Streep, a woman who once called Harvey Weinstein God, is calling out the women near the president for their silence. Melania, Ivanka, right? Details next. Okay, this is going to be fun. It's time for our Seen and Unseen segment, and this is where we expose what's really behind the big cultural stories of the day. Last night, we blew the lid off this Time's Up initiative, where Hollywood elites have band together to supposedly stop sexual harassment across the fruited plain. I said it was an obvious political movement to organize against Republicans, including Donald Trump. Now, a new interview with a leading member of Time's Up, Meryl Streep, may prove my point. For all that is seen and unseen, I'm joined by managing editor of EWTN News and Fox contributor Raymond Arroyo. And so, Raymond, what did old Meryl pull off this time?
Well, she did an interview with the New York Times. This is called self-preservation a la Hollywood. She's got a lot to answer for. Rose McGowan, an actress who was abused by Harvey Weinstein, charged Meryl Streep, who worked with Weinstein on innumerable films, okay? The Iron Lady, The Giver. He didn't only produce those films, he helped shape them, he practically directed them. They were very close. McGowan and others say Meryl Streep knew of this abuse and was silent. Well, the New York Times today pressed Meryl Streep on this. She got very testy.
She gets very defensive in this interview, right? Very defensive. Much so. She tries to, like, well, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know.
Deflection. We don't know everything about everybody.
She called him God.
Right.
In the 2012 Golden Globes, called him God. In the last Golden Globes, she went after Donald Trump without mentioning him by name, talking about the foreigners. If we kick them all out, you'll have nothing to watch but football. That was before the NFL tanked. And mixed martial arts. She says this from her home in Connecticut, which are not the arts. They disrespect, invites respect. Violence incites violence when the powerful use their position to bully others. We all do. She was attacking Trump last Golden Globes.
Well,
so
here's what she said to the New York Times today. I don't want to hear about the silence of me. I want to hear about the silence of Melania Trump.
What?
I want to hear from her. She has so much valuable to say, and so does Ivanka. I want her to speak now. Now, hold the phone.
Wait a second. Melania has spoken, as has Ivanka Trump. Didn't they see the India trip? What is she talking about?
The content of this interview was about the silence in Hollywood about Harvey Weinstein. Last time I checked, Melania and Ivanka Trump were not in any Harvey Weinstein films, nor did they work closely with him. So there's a lot of deflection going on here, and this whole Time's Up movement, as we discussed last night.
It's a front group for left-wing activists.
This is Hollywood trying to absolve itself of its guilt and silence.
Okay, so they allowed this sexual predator to roam free, ruin careers. Paul Sorvino, one of my favorite actors, love him, always have loved him. He said today.
Lashed out.
Now, what is this? This is TMZ.
TMZ caught him, and he's talking about his daughter, Mira Sorvino. Here's my question to Meryl Streep. Where were you when Mira Sorvino
had her career
blacklisted?
tanked?
Woman was an Academy Award winner. Suddenly she can't get a job.
Yeah, because Harvey Weinstein and Bob Weinstein didn't want her to get hired by anybody, right? And so they called out the dogs on her, and they said, don't hire her to all these directors.
Paul Sorvino is lashing out now. Watch this.
If I meet him on the street, he ought to hope that he goes to jail. Because if we come across, I think he'll be lying on the floor somehow, magically.
That's Goodfellas all over again.
He went much further than that. That was just the opening. But Sorvino is justifiably upset. They destroyed this woman's career, Mira Sorvino.
And where's the girl power? So now it's all convenient. They come out with Time's Up. Time's Up, $13 million. Time's Up. We're going to help the women who are driving tractors in Nebraska if they don't have a voice. Oh, get out. You're all such frauds. We know exactly what they covered up and exactly what they knew because they didn't want their own careers rocked and they wanted Harvey's help.
It's an attempt to collectively wash their hands of the guilt and scapegoat on people like Melania and Ivanka Trump. Sorry, this is the wrong
Melania and Ivanka. I'll get out of town. What about what's going on with Bill Weir in Key West? Anderson Cooper didn't know about the pot being smoked. He was shocked about that, apparently.
Right. Well, Randy Kaye went to this pot den in Denver. This was the centerpiece of CNN's New Year's Eve coverage. But
this is CNN. Where does James Earl Jones get to go to get his voiceover back? That's my question.
Anderson Cooper was shocked by this shocked.
Shocked? They were all drunk. What's he shocked by?
She ended up at a paint party where I guess this pot bus ultimately ended up at a paint party where for some reason, I don't know, I guess people who have been riding around getting stoned all night want to end up painting in like day glow colors.
Look at you talking like you don't know what it's like to be high.
I don't know.
I have no idea.
I have no idea. The whole thing surprised me as much as anybody else, I got to tell you.
Surprised him?
I love the giggle, by the way.
But how could he be surprised? Laura, this was a celebration.
Like paint bus? I mean, can we lose the like? I mean, we're not Valley, you know.
Well, the hours of New Year's Eve coverage on CNN is like a celebration of depravity. How this reflects America, I don't know. Bill Weir, poor Bill Weir's down in Key West. He's getting felt up and groped by guys. Andy and Anderson.
Oh, wait, do we have it?
Anderson and Andy.
Yeah, let's watch.
That clip?
Let's
watch this.
Here is the drag queen, affectionately known as Sushi. Hi, Sushi! Happy New Year! Happy New Year! I believe I was just groped.
Hello, Middle America. This is where it happens.
And Anderson Cooper is shocked by the pot den.
Shocked. There's gambling in this casino.
Let's remember when Kathy Griffin stripped down and did a sexual act in front of Anderson Cooper.
I'm almost wanting her back after what I just saw.
I hate to say it, it could be a step up.
Right.
You need to smoke pot to understand what's happening on CNN.
Only way you can watch
CNN
CNN ever, Raymond. Thanks so much. And by the way, don't go anywhere because in a moment, my call for President Trump to make his boldest move yet against the deep state. You don't want to miss this. Keep it here. The co-founders of Fusion GPS, that research company behind the Trump dossier, have written an audacious New York Times op-ed claiming that conservatives are spinning conspiracy theories about them and their beneficent company. They demanded Congress release transcripts of testimony by their firm's members. Oh, I couldn't agree more. Maybe then we'll find out why Fusion GPS has refused to answer key questions or have its leaders testify publicly. But why stop there? Tonight, I'm calling on the Trump administration to declassify all documents and all testimony concerning the Hillary Clinton email investigation, the Russia probe, and the role played by Fusion GPS. And the people, my friends, have a right to know. They have a right to transparency from their government. Unless national security matters are involved, with everything that's on the line here, with all of the doubting about this investigation and the concerns, let's shed daylight on this whole sordid mess. And then we'll see who's really colluding with whom. For more insight, let's turn to a pair of reporters who have been all over these stories. I'm so happy they're both here. They're among my favorite reporters, John Solomon of The Hill and Wall Street Journal's Kim Strassel. Great to see both of you. John, we got some breaking news tonight from Devin Nunes. Tell us.
House Intelligence Committee, after a surprise meeting, Chris Wray, Rod Rosenstein went up to the Hill, met with Paul Ryan.
Deputy FBI Director, and
Deputy Attorney General. They both showed up at the Hill. They had a meeting with Paul Ryan. A couple hours later, surprise, surprise, they're finally going to get the access to the documents they've been seeking since August about Fusion GPS. Nunes made the announcement about a half hour ago. And everyone's very optimistic. For the first time, we're going to see some of these documents and learn a little bit more about what really went on with the dossier.
Now, Kim Strassel, do you think it's amazing what the threat of a contempt of Congress action will do to some of these government officials? Is that behind this newfound desire to show documents that they've been holding back for many, many, many months?
Paul Ryan gets a lot of credit here. I think we just wish he'd have done it sooner because obviously this is what it took. These guys have been giving Devin Nunes and the Intelligence Committee a runaround since August when the subpoenas first went out. They had all kinds of excuses, all of them bogus. My favorite one was that somehow they couldn't talk because of an inspector general investigation, as if that would ever trump Congress. But what it took was the speaker essentially saying, look, if you don't hand these over, you will be brought up on contempt charges. And nobody wants that. And it was the final kick they needed, apparently. And let's hope they actually comply this time and stop with the games.
And John, I also want to get into this Fusion GPS deal in the New York Times today. Again, people have to understand that they are the ones who got their hands on this Russian dossier. Right. It's been discredited. Looks like it could have been used to go after those FISA warrants.
That's right.
They're moaning and whining that basically they're being put upon, and they want to release transcripts of their behind closed doors interviews that they did with on the Hill. Couldn't they just talk about what they said?
I wish they would. I think we would learn an awful lot about their interactions with the FBI, how they took this political document, got it into the criminal justice system. I think we'd also learn about some things they said about the FBI that might be so flattering. And we might learn a little bit about this guy, Christopher Steele, and what he was doing and whether all the things he said in public are really true.
How about the work they've done for Russia?
Oh, yeah.
They've done a lot of work over the years for Russia, including on the Magnitsky Act that sanctions.
Right. The very people who were meeting with Don Jr. at the Trump Tower, they had a connection to those people. There's an awful lot of things that we need to have a lot more transparency about.
Kim Strassel, that Russian lawyer who ended up meeting at Trump Tower, and you heard Steve Bannon's comments about that in that new Michael Wolff book. We saw that excerpt earlier, called it treasonous and unpatriotic. We have information that that lawyer, Veselnitskaya, actually met with the Fusion GPS people as well. I mean, that's why I want all of this declassified. If there's any classified documents, I want this all released. So it's about time this whole thing wrapped up, got to the bottom of it. Everybody's cards should be on the table and get this over with.
And she didn't just meet with them, by the way. She met with Glenn Simpson in the hours before she went to Trump Tower and in the hours she left after she left Trump Tower. Now, he's claiming that there's no connection between the dossier and these particular set of Russians who are connected to the Kremlin. But we need to know all this. I love your idea, Laura, of declassification. It looks as though Congress has the ability to do that, even though it hasn't necessarily, and it's a rare thing. We have to be very careful of exposing sources and methods. But when you're at a level this high, where you've got accusations on one side that the president was engaged in a conspiracy with a foreign power, and accusations on the other that our law enforcement agencies were, in a bad way, tapping Americans, using opposition research documents to launch investigations. Those are as serious as an accusations as you get, and you don't trust that anymore to a commission or a special counsel. You let the American people see the documents themselves and work it through themselves.
Is there anything on collusion? I mean, we have all this time go by. They've interviewed all these witnesses, brought in lots of White House officials, from the lower staffers to the upper echelon. What do we have?
The latest I've heard, and I've done a lot of digging on this, there's still no evidence the president was involved in collusion. They are looking at one family member and some trips and conversations he had based on some new information that Mike Flynn may have provided. But we don't know much more than that. But to date, there's nothing in the public that says there's collusion. And you've seen the Democrats really pull back from conclusion.
James Clapper yesterday, I think we have a clip. I want to share this with everybody. Let's watch.
There are other factors that I think were the stimulus for the investigation, and the revelation about George Papadopoulos, which was not a name on my radar scope when I left.
Kim Strassel, your reaction to old Clapper there.
Well, so we've been told just recently by the New York Times that it was George Papadopoulos that inspired this entire investigation, not the discredited dossier. Of course, just last year, the New York Times was saying that it was, in fact, the dossier that did it. But now that it's been discredited, now it's George Papadopoulos. So to find out that the head of intelligence says he doesn't even know this guy's name, he wasn't on his radar screen at the time that he was leaving office, it's another reason to be incredibly skeptical of the notion that it was some 28-year-old junior Trump staffer that somehow launched an entire FBI probe.
Oh, it's ridiculous. And guys, by the way, our comments from our viewers on CNN's glamorization of pot I'm going to expose a media pet peeve every time the temperature drops